All right, good afternoon, family. How we doing today? Great, great, great. Good to hear. Very thankful once again to be able to host an educational and uplifting and empowering event such as this. I want you all to understand the education and the upliftment and the empowerment happens when all of us come together in the room and we build and we support and we show our alignment with the energy that is coming from the front as well as the house. And I say that because, you know, sometimes we get disillusioned and we just believe, well, what are we going to do? I was talking to a gentleman the other day. He said, well, what are we going to do? There's nothing that we can do. You know, folks are controlling every arm of the politics, every arm of the economics, every arm of the judicial, every arm of the, and I said to him, I said, that's because you're not understanding where the power is coming from. And I said, the power is coming from our support of belief in and alignment with that which is out there. And I said, you know, if you just align yourself and supported and believed in yourself and your own institutions and your own people and the teachings that are coming from those who really care about you, then you would change your predicament. And so today I'm very thankful and honored to be able to bring in a brother who's going to assist us in understanding a little bit more about ourselves and a little bit more about our root and a little bit more about our power and capacity. You know, you ever drive a car with the emergency brake on and have somebody get in the car and they say, you know, is the car been running good? No, the car's not running that good right now. It seems to be slow. I can't get it to go over a certain mile per hour, and I'm smelling this weird smell. I don't know what it is. And then they say, well, you know, you have your emergency brake on. And you take the emergency brake off, and all of a sudden the car goes boom, and they can now drive like they would typically drive. I think that's sometimes what happens when people come here. The capacity is there. You know, your learning capacity is there. Your intelligence, your DNA has the information. Your DNA has the capacity. Your mind has the capacity. Your melanated beings has this. You know, we don't only get sunlight from the sun, but we get information from the sun. And so we're getting all this download of this information, and all of that is inside of us. And we have that capability and capacity. So today I remind you of how important it is for us to come out and not only get the information that our brother is going to share, but give him the information and give him the inspiration and support that he needs in order to continue this. It's no different than anything else. You know, if you find that, you know, the support is not there, sometimes we say, well, I got to start doing something else, right? You know, if I didn't get the support in the restaurant, I would say, well, maybe I need to go back and get my good government job, right? And I don't want to do that. Can't do that. Can't do that. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and the restaurant. I'm Dr. Brute, and somebody really wants me really bad, but can you all turn off your cell phones? That's probably somebody trying to figure out how to get here, but we'll work that out in a minute. The E-Life restaurant, this is and remember what I said about support when I say this, but this is a 30-year-old restaurant providing a viable food source to a community disserved and underserved. Those claps make a difference, trust me. They do make a difference, because this is a lot, you know, when you think about, I'm at that age now where all my friends are retiring, right? And they're now sitting at home calling me up, what you doing, man? Let's go, you know, hit a golf ball, or let's go, you know, sail on, I got a new boat, let's go sailing. No, I'm at the restaurant, I'll be here all day, for the foreseeable future. But it's you start reckoning with the whole thing as, man, did I do the right thing? And of course I know I did, but did I do the right thing? You know, after all of this commitment, and all of this time and energy that has gone into this, it becomes tough at times, though. But that's where you all come in. When I see you all come in and people come and say, Doc, I'm just thankful that you're still here. I'm thankful, and whenever somebody asks me how's the business, how things going, I say we holding on. Well, there are two types of holding on. I want y'all to be clear. And I think some people get it confused because they think I'm talking about one holding on. I'm really talking about the other holding on. So one holding on is, we holding good. Everything's good. We holding steady. The other holding on is, man, we need you to come back in here at least 3-4 times a month because it's becoming more difficult as the tariffs have taken. The tariff announcement came in America at a point where all of a sudden we got emails from all of our distributors, the prices went up immediately. And I was like, well, wait a minute, y'all already got the stuff in the warehouse. Why are y'all raising the price on the stuff that y'all got in the warehouse? Y'all should be raising the price on the stuff that you get in the warehouse that's gonna have this new tariff. Nope, the prices go up right now. And now we're just kind of stuck in the middle because I don't want to charge you more, but I gotta pay more. But how do I circumvent, how do I balance it out? Well, that's the balancing act that we've been on, since we've been in business. It's exciting, it's exhilarating, but at some point, if anybody's ever been a boxer or know anything about boxing, at some point you enjoy the bum of the week. Send me the bum of the week so I know I can knock him out. I'll play with him for a couple rounds, but I'm gonna knock him out in the third round. He's done. And so I say all that to say that your continued support is really, really important for businesses like ours. It's really important. We went through the whole COVID. Many of you all were with us during COVID, and we stayed open every day. We never shut down. Even when they were saying, look, if you're not essential, whatever, I decided at that point, they didn't have to tell me that I was essential. I knew that I was essential. I just said, no, we're not shutting down.
That's right.
And it was just my daughter and myself. My daughter said, well, if you going in, I'm going in. So my daughter and myself, we sat out front in our old location, and we made sure that restaurant was open every day during that period of time. And it's our commitment to you, because when I first started this business, the reason why I started it is because I said it doesn't do us any good for my family to eat healthy, and everybody else is getting an ambulance visit 3, 4, 5 times over the course of the year because somebody had a heart attack, somebody had a stroke, somebody got a diabetic, something or other, or whatever. It wasn't doing us any good. I said, we have to save our community. So my children got somebody to marry, right? Because that's important. My lineage is important. I got to make sure, okay, look, we got to figure this out because y'all got to find somebody, and this is a great place to find them because at least they're making the decision to eat healthy, right? So y'all think this was just about, a business. No, it's not about a business. It's about our community. It's about the survival of our community. And we say that eating this way will extend your life and improve your quality of life. And I think that's real important. A couple of other benefits you get is you look better, you feel better, and you have more energy, right? When you eat this way. And some people would challenge me. They would say, well, Doc, some of the stuff you got over there is, it's not as healthy as maybe some of the other stuff, and maybe not as healthy as this that I like to eat over here. And I tell folks that, well, we're a point of transition. So some of my customers are here for the first day today. And they just literally got off of Crack Donald's, Murder King, Taco Hell, Wind Disease, Chokers, Bow Strangles, the International House of Pulmonary Heart Disease, Slop Eyes, and Sick Filet. They just got off of all of that. And I can't take them to raw organic all day long, day one. We have to give them a point of transition. So we allow them a point of transition. So for those who want to go to the top, they can get there. For those who need to sit at the bottom for a minute and do this piece by piece, we can do that too. So it's important to understand why we're doing what we're doing and the fact that our goal and purpose is to really provide this viable food source to our community. Back in 1995, I left a corporate job doing IT. It's paid very well. I was still going through that phase of, he's the first black person to be an engineer or whatever I was, analyst, network analyst back then. He's the first one in our company to be, so I was, believe it or not, in 1995, there was still some more firsts for black people, right? But it paid very well, but realized that no, it wasn't enough. I was at a lecture, and there was a woman practicing her speech. I was connecting up all the computers and making sure all the technology was talking. And she said at a point when she was practicing her speech, this was before the conference, she said, if you control a man's food, you control him. And at the minute she said him, I had no plans. Before she said him, I had no plans on opening up a restaurant. No interest, no desire. I was good with going to get my food where I was getting it from. The minute she said him, it immediately, like I was hypnotized. Immediately I said, I've got to open up a restaurant. I've got to, because this is what's happening to our people. I'm seeing the increase in blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar. I'm seeing the ramps. In my community, it was so many ramps being built on homes, it was almost as though it was a style. You know, well, our ramp is a little wider, and it kind of got a slope or whatever, and it goes zigzag or whatever. It was crazy, all these ramps. I was living in Temple Hills, and everybody's house was getting a ramp on it. And eventually I had to ask, well, why is it? Well, because, you know, mama had a stroke. Or daddy, he lost his leg to, you know, diabetes or whatever. You know, the list goes on. I said, well, this is crazy. We're eating ourselves to death. And then, again, going to this workshop and setting up those computers and hearing the white woman say that if you control a man's food, you control him. I said, well, somebody else is controlling our food that doesn't have our best interest at heart. And we have to change that. So we did. And it wasn't easy. I can tell you, leaving a good paying job in corporate America, and now accepting my first day of business, we made $18. And you got to know, I was scratching my head saying, Lord, I think I did the wrong thing. Because now not only am I not going to be able to help anybody, but I'm going to go down the drain as well, because I had just spent all this money to build the location. But we held on, and we held on, and we ran into really significant people like Dr. Jewel Pookrum, and at one point we encountered, I got a phone call on a Monday from a guy whose name you'll probably recognize, Michael Baisden. He said, hey, this is Michael Baisden. And I said, yeah, right, okay. He said, I'd like for you to come on my radio show tomorrow. I said, really, this is Mike Baisden? Yeah, this is really Mike Baisden. I said, okay, what do you want me to talk about? And he told me diabetes, and I talked about diabetes in his show, and he bragged about the fact that that was one of his most popular shows that he had when we were talking about diabetes. And on that show, or during that show, I had Google Voice had just come out. I got 12,000 voicemails. I'm sure Google Voice was like, what in the world? And I got 25,000 emails. You better know I didn't get to all of those people. Even now, some of them I just couldn't do it. It was so much, because this was week after week after week coming on his show, and I'm very thankful to both. Both of them had a very significant impact on our business. A third person would be Stevie Wonder. There was one evening, it was about 8:59 and 59 seconds left on the clock. We were all shutting down, everybody's cleaning up, ready to go and do whatever we were going to do that evening. And this big dude, he was about 6'9", walks through the door, and he says, can you move these tables over here and move these chairs over here? Can you block off this section? And I'm looking at him, respecting his size, and saying, brother, I'm not understanding. What you want me to do? What, you know, it's 9 o'clock. What is it that you need me to do? I need you to block off all of this right here, set up this section right here, just for eating for 6 people. Okay, all right, well, you know, due to your size, I'm gonna go ahead and do what you're telling me to do, because I don't feel like getting into a fight tonight with no giant. So I went in and did what he told me to do, and I saw him go back out to the car. He got into a big SUV, and, you know, he popped his head back out. He opens up the passenger door, and out comes Stevie Wonder. And I said, oh my goodness. So I get on the phone, I'm telling all the staff, hey, get it together, cook, warm up the food, he's serious. So we fed Stevie Wonder that night, and Stevie ate like a horse. He ate everything I came to him and told him that was on the menu. He's like, okay, give me one of those, and give me those, drink, that drink. And it was such an amazing night that we had with him. But the most amazing part about it was what happened the next day. And see, white people are a little different than us in this sense, I think. But white people came to that restaurant. That was the one in Tacoma Park. And they said, hi, how you doing? Is this the restaurant where Stevie Wonder was? Yes. I said, yes. Okay, great. Excuse me, you don't mind. Where did he sit? And I said, well, he sat over there. Oh, okay, great. Can we have that seat? I said, yeah, no problem. You can have that seat. And I said, excuse me, what did he eat? And I said, oh, okay. All right, well, these are the things that he ate right here. Matter of fact, this is his ticket. Boom, 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 boom. And these are the things that he ate. Can we have that? Yeah, just give me everything Stevie got. Okay, great. All right, so we gave them everything. And this happened like maybe 20 times. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Like, there's something that we're missing. Because, black folk were coming because, hey, you got some publicity, and they showed up in the restaurant and they got something to eat. But there was a different phenomenon. They wanted to sit in his seat, order the food that he ordered, all of that. And that was a part of that whole scenario. And it was the most publicity we got that we didn't have to pay for that got us the biggest return since we've been in business. So that was really good to have that happen. So we've gone through a lot. We went through the challenges of the economic downturn of the 2008, and then the one that either we are out of or are still in the middle of that started a couple years ago, and then COVID. We're still moving and doing what we set out to do. We moved into this new location in 2003, November, and our purpose for establishing this, which is the largest piece of space that we have, and all the rest of all the space that we have, is that we really wanted to shift and become more of an entertainment venue. Why did we want to become entertainment? Because I think the entertainment space is much like the food space is. There's such I guess, a drought for really good quality, healthy entertainment in the world that we live in. I said, well, let me do what I can to be able to foster some space where people could come and not only express themselves in a good, positive way, but also hear it as an audience. They could hear it. So we launched this space for that purpose. Not only entertainment, but of course, education as well, as we're going to get today. And we know that it's missing. We know that our people are in the midst of a famine. So we knew we needed to do this. But what I didn't know is the same thing that happened with the food was going to happen here. And that is, people were going to be a little bit challenged with doing something new. They kind of get accustomed to listen to the gangster rap and all that crazy stuff that they listen to. And when you tell them, no, we got, like last night, we got straight ahead jazz coming at you. Excellent performance. Excellent, world-class performers were in here last night. And but it's still growing. So it's at its infantile stage now. It's still growing. I would suspect this time next year it's going to be wall to wall. We'll be out in the parking lot. People will be begging to get on our calendar. It's just not there yet. So, but we know what this cycle is like because we've gone through it with the food. And it's a labor of love. We're excited about what we do, but it's not necessarily the get rich quick scheme. Trust me. It is very challenging, and I have yet to see where I've increased my prices and my customers will say, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Take care of the business. We want this business. It never happens that way. And of course, it's just the reality that we face. But I'm very thankful to our brother Chike, Dr. Chike Akua, who gave me a call and said, hey, I'm going to be in the city, is there anything we could do maybe during the time that I'm there? And I said, man, this is great, because this is what I do. This is what I love to do. This is what drives me. This is the motivation to continue to bring other educators in. And we've had them all. We've had, of course, you all probably have seen Professor James Smalls and our brother Kaba Khomeini, and who else? We've had, what's our brother comes up from Texas? Kwesi, yeah, Baba Kwesi. Ashra Kwesi has been in, him and his wife. We had a brother who had the church down in Atlanta, who walked away from traditional Christianity and opened up the African church. Ray Hagins has been here. I mean, if I go way back, we've had Dr. Sabi and Dr. Africa, and of course, Queen Afua and Dr. Jewel Pukrum when we were in our other building. So we've done a whole lot of work in educating. So this is just a continuum in what we call the communiversity, where we're bringing you all together so that we can educate you all with this information. And today, again, being no different, we're wanting you to make sure that you soak up as much knowledge and energy as you possibly can. This is what this is here for. Please benefit from what it is that we're doing today. Please open up your minds, because some of you who may have never heard of this brother, may have never heard the information that he's going to be sharing, maybe what you thought you knew and what you thought was right and true, maybe it wasn't. And maybe it's time that you open up your mind and recognize that the information that you're going to get today is really information that's going to empower you. So let's look to be empowered so that we can live the rest of this life with better direction, and more empowerment and more upliftment and more unity. I think that's a big deal with us too. We need to be more unified as a body of people. When we come together, even when we came together to do wrong, we were more successful. Let's come together to do right, and let's be successful as well. So I've got my brother's bio here, and I was looking for my glasses. Oh, I put them on the wrong side. All right, great, I can read it. Because otherwise I was going to have to go with what I remember. Nana, Dr. Chike Akua is an associate professor of higher education leadership at Clark Atlanta University and one of the most sought after speakers at urban schools, colleges, universities, and educational conferences. Dr. Akua is the author of 13 books, some of which are right over there on the table there in total, producer of a series of historical videos online and 70 Black history and African proverb posters. His book, Honoring Our Ancestral Obligations, 7 Steps to Black Student Success, is a favorite on college and university campuses. He has also developed Reading Revolution Online, a web-based, culturally relevant academic support tool that increases reading comprehension, vocabulary development, grammar, and writing skills. Dr. Akua has been featured in Ebony Magazine and more recently in Black Enterprise Magazine and the Washington Post for his work as an innovative educational leader. He has helped lead over 1,000 students and parents on trips throughout Egypt, Ghana, Senegal, and Morocco. And in 2022, Dr. Akua was installed as a chief in Ghana and given the name Nana Abaka, meaning leader with heart, spirit, and soul. Dr. Akua earned a doctorate in educational policy studies at Georgia State University, a Master of Arts degree in education with a concentration in school counseling from Clark Atlanta University, and is a Bachelor of Arts degree in English education from Hampton University. Dr. Akua is the father of 2 sons and resides just outside of Atlanta, Georgia in the U.S. with his wife of 30 years. Learn more about Dr. Akua at www.readingrevolution.org. Without further ado, let us put our hands together for our brother, our big brother and teacher, Dr. Chike Akua.
Everybody say it's our time.
It's our time.
Come on, it's our time.
It's our time.
It's our season.
It's our season.
No limits.
No limits.
No boundaries.
No boundaries.
I see blessings.
I see
all around me.
All around.
No limits.
No limits.
No boundaries.
No boundaries.
I see blessings.
I see blessings.
All around me.
All around.
Give yourselves a black hand. Man, let me tell you what an honor, privilege, and blessing it is to be here at Everlasting Life. And I'm always invigorated by the powerful words of Dr. Baruch and what he has built here, because he is an institution builder. Ashe? And we must do everything that we possibly can to support those that are building sustainable institutions in our communities. Let's give him a round of applause, please. And so, brother, anytime I'm in the area or anytime that I can steer any of my scholar friends who are doing this kind of work, I will always send them this way, because this is a powerful and wonderful place to be. I always like to begin with what time it is, and not the time that's on your watch or on the clock on the wall, but a great African scholar by the name of Dr. Benjamin E. Mays said it's 11:59 on the clock of destiny. And life is like a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon you, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to you to use it. You'll suffer if you lose it, give account if you abuse it. It's only a minute, but eternity is in it. And with that minute, you, me, and we can change and transform the world. So if you really believe that we in this place can change and transform the world, would everyone please say Ashe?
Ashe.
Well, you all know that Ashe means I agree. It means let it be so. It represents the activating energy and the presence of the Spirit that is both within us and around us at all times. And so I'm going to use that word Ashe as a call and response today. But I want you to remember something. When I say something I definitely don't want you to forget, I'm going to use that word Ashe and have you to repeat after me. But you don't have to wait until I say it. If I say something that leads to an instant awakening, if I say something that taps your spirit or touches your soul, if I say something that makes you think, man, I know some other people that need to know this, then you can say Ashe, and that lets me know we're all on the same page. Ashe?
Ashe.
All right. A few people that I need to shout out today. One is young brother Jared over here, who is going to be matriculating at Hampton University in the fall. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Give him a round of applause, please. So that poem that I just recited by Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, though he was the president at Morehouse College, I learned that as a student at Hampton University. When I became a student leader, we had to memorize, and I committed that to memory because the words were so powerful, speaking to the times that we're in, even though he wrote it many, many decades ago. So we wish you all the best on your academic journey at Hampton. It was one of the best experiences of my life, and I'm sure you'll have a wonderful experience as well. Let's give this young brother another round of applause. And then I'm here with my sister, and she told me that I need to introduce her. I said, why do I need to introduce her? I was going to introduce her anyway, but why do I need to introduce you? She said, because I have been told that people see me with you, and they know that I'm not your wife, and they think something's going on here, right? So this is my sister Leslie. That's not my wife, that's my sister. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not one of them kind of brothers, you know. See me with, so it's going to be my sister or my wife or the people that I know. So yes, me and my wife have been happily married for over 30 years now. Yeah, I said over 30 years. That's, yeah. Repeat after me, please. Black love is black power. Black love is black power, and we need that now more than ever. Let me bring you greetings from Clark Atlanta University, one of our great HBCUs, where I'm honored to serve as an associate professor on the faculty in the Department of Educational Leadership. And then I also want to bring you greetings from the Teacher Transformation Institute, where we use standards-based, research-driven, African-centered and culturally relevant instructional strategies to increase student success. Now those are just some big sounding words to say that our children are brilliant. Ashe? But many of them are in schools and in school districts where they're seen as a problem rather than as people. And so our team, we go into schools and school districts, colleges, universities, and educational conferences, and we teach teachers and leaders how to bring out the brilliance in our children. And we do that in a number of different ways. We do that by way of culturally relevant instructional strategies. We do that by way of culturally relevant materials. We do it by way of large group instruction, social emotional learning focus groups, financial literacy, and then STEM labs and different things of that nature. We even do it by way of model teaching lessons. Because when we train teachers, you know, they'll say, well, that sounds really good, Dr. Cool, but you don't have my students. So we say, no problem, give us your students. Give us your lesson plans, and we will teach it and see if there's not a different level of engagement. Ashe? So I say that to say, probably all of you in here have ties to different schools, whether those are public schools, private schools, religious schools, African-centered schools, and we want you to take the resources that we have back to whatever space that you're operating in. Ashe? And let them know that we have some solutions for that. My prayer is that you will have the same smile on your face that these young people have, as we've had the opportunity to work with young people all over the country in varying capacities. And one of the things that I know is that when you teach our children the best of who they are, they rise to the occasion and they achieve accordingly. Ashe? So it's customary when we come together that we begin by giving honor to the Most High, who is known by many names and worshiped in many ways, certainly the one source and the one force through which we all live, move, and have our being. Ashe? We also give honor to our ancestors because there's an African proverb which says, if we stand tall, it's because we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. Or as Dr. Jacob Carruthers has said, indeed our stride is wide because we're walking in the footsteps of giants. If you have your phone with you, would you hold your phone in the air for a second? All right? Like some social media volunteers, and that can actually be everybody, because what I'm about to share with you is so powerful that it cannot be contained to this place. So we can take this local event and make it a global event. Ashe? So if you see some pictures and images that you think other people need to see, then take a picture and post it so that we can make this local event a what? A global event. So we can make this local event a what? A global event. Ashe? All right, so I'm going to be speaking from several of my books, actually. One of them, Honoring Our Ancestral Obligations. Another one is Kepra, Ancient Kemetic Concepts in Education and Transformation. But I'll be referencing a few of my books in this presentation. You've heard it said before, a picture is worth what, everybody? 1,000 words. And if that's the case, you're about to read a book of about 50,000 pages, because the pictures and images that I have to share are not commonly circulated. But you have to look with more than just your two physical eyes. You have to look with what our ancestors called the Ujat. Everybody say Ujat. The Ujat is the third eye. Some people call it the third eye. Actually, it's the first eye. The eye of intuition, the eye of all-seeing enlightenment that allows us to see beyond the physical realm and into the mental and spiritual dimensions. Even as the great poet Listerveld Middleton said, sharpen your eye and tune your ear so you know what you see and understand what you hear. So if you're all ready to get started, everybody say, let's get it.
Let's get it.
All right, so my topic is African sacred science. African sacred science. And I don't want to assume that we're all using the same definitions, and so I'm going to break these words down to you. When I say African, I'm talking about that which has emanated out of the hearts, minds, spirits, and souls of black people. When we say sacred, we're talking about that which is holy, sanctified, set apart for a high and holy purpose. When we say science, science comes from the Latin word scientia, meaning to know. To know what? Whatever it is that you want to know. Our ancestors developed a method for finding that. And what they discovered was that there was a method for preparing healthy food. There was a method for raising strong children. There was a method for building strong businesses. There was a method for building strong black male-female relationships. There was a method for building strong communities. There was a method for everything that needed to be done. And in order for it to be effective, it had to be systematic and structured and scientific. Ashe? So whatever situation we find ourselves in, our culture is the key and our culture is the cure, because our ancestors developed a science that speaks to that. But the problem is we weren't taught that sacred science. Is this making sense, brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
And so we want to just kind of dig into a little bit of that science today. But I want to preface my remarks by saying I travel quite a bit. I probably do about 20 to 25 cities per year. And several of those cities 2 to 3 times per year. And as I go throughout the airports, the Department of Homeland Security has a sign. You're probably familiar with it, even if you don't travel much, whether or not. I'm sure you've heard this before. It says, if you see something, say something. It's a matter of national security. If you see something, what? Say something. Well, in the world of education, I've seen some things. And I'm saying some things because it's a matter of black national security. Ashe? There are certain things that we must do for ourselves that only we can do for ourselves. That even the most well-meaning other people of goodwill cannot do for us. Is this making sense? And it's not only is it a matter of national security, we're at the highest level possible in terms of what is unfolding right now in front of our eyes. In the last 30 to 60 days, we have seen executive orders and different political movements that are unraveling things that our elders and ancestors put in place that we didn't think could be knocked down. There was already benign neglect of our history and culture to begin with, but now there are absolutely fervent, direct attacks at dismantling our history and erasing our history to ensure that our children don't know who they are. Ashe? And so if we're not very clear about this, we're going to see some very challenging times to come. And so I say, don't believe a word that I say. I would like for you to research it for yourself. Don't believe a word that I say. Research it for yourself and see if you don't come up with some of the same conclusions that I have. When we talk about science, Professor Kaba Kamene says, science was seen spirituality, and spirituality was unseen science. Yeah, you might want to get a shot of that. That comes from his book, Spirituality Before Religions. Science was seen spirituality, and spirituality was unseen science. You see, in traditional African civilizations, there was no separation between the spiritual and the material, the sacred versus the secular. It was understood that you couldn't have the material without the spiritual, because the spiritual was the essence of the material, and the material was just an outward formation of the spiritual. But in the Western world, there is this schism that attempts to split the spirit from matter, as if that's even possible. Ashe? And what happens in the process is we become despiritualized in the process. This is why in the scientific research literature, there's a concept called spirit murder of black children in the classroom. That when our children go into these spaces, their spirits are being murdered. And it's devastating when you watch that happen. I used to be a middle school teacher, and on a team of 4 teachers, I'm the language arts teacher, you got a social studies teacher, science teacher, math teacher. When the students come to me, they're on point, they're prepared, they do their work, they're respectful, but then when they go down the hall, with a teacher that doesn't know how to teach, with a teacher that doesn't look like them, or a teacher that doesn't care, and then they're experiencing spirit murder. Ashe? So science was seen spirituality, and spirituality was unseen science, and we have to tap into our original science if we are going to overcome our circumstances today. Neely Fuller tells us that we're living in a time of maximum sophisticated confusion. Maximum sophisticated confusion. Weapons of mass deception and weapons of mass destruction, which turn our people into weapons of mass destruction. Let's say that again. Weapons of mass distraction. And this is one of the greatest weapons of mass distraction. Ashe? If you're not careful, you can have good intentions and still be distracted. Weapons of mass distraction, weapons of mass deception. The weapons of mass distraction, if you notice all those executive orders that were coming down the pipeline, and it's hard to even watch the news today because it's almost as if it is intentionally designed to disempower you, to make you feel disempowered, to make you feel disillusioned, to make you feel confused, to make you feel like you don't know what you should do, right? It can be overwhelming. And you need to understand that this is by design. But white folks are doing what they've always done. Thank you for that one, Ashe. They're still playing by the same playbook. It's a little more intentional, but they're doing what they've always done. The only people that might not be clear is us. But we better get clear real quick. Ashe? So I have to take you back in time to a time when we were sovereign as a people. Because if we're going to return to sovereignty, and sovereignty just means that we control what goes on in our communities. But we need to know what we looked like when we were whole and not fragmented as a people. So we have to go back to a time when black people led the world in scientific innovation, literary production, and wealth creation. Our African sacred science is what allowed us to be sovereign and to be respected all over the world. Ashe? To be respected all over the world. So the problem, though, is most of our people know nothing about this. They may have heard, various statements like, oh, we were once kings and queens, which doesn't tell us much. Because, and I'm guilty of having said this in the past, but everybody wasn't kings and queens. Everybody can't be kings and queens. Ashe? We need scientists, we need engineers, we need teachers, we need professors, and Lord knows we need some counselors. Ashe? Do we need some counselors? Okay, we need people from all walks of life, but we also need to understand that we do come from royalty and we must walk in our royalty. Ashe? And so I want to take you back to this time for a little bit so that we can see what we looked like and what we did when we were a sovereign people. And that will give us an indication of what we can do today. So we know at the beginning of time when Earth was formed, there was one landmass. The scientists referred to it as Pangea, and then the continents began to separate and shift and so forth. But all life, we know, on planet Earth began deep in Central Africa. And the original names tell the whole story. What we today call Africa, one of the ancient names was Al-Kibulan. Everybody say Al-Kibulan. And look at what it means, land of the spirit people. Land of the spirit people. That caught me because when I heard that, I said, man, why would they call it land of the spirit people? Because we were spiritually centered in everything that we did. We brought spirit to reading and writing, language and literature and architecture and engineering and philosophy and physics and mathematics and medicine and science and technology. We brought spirit to all of that, but now we're here under this paradigm And here again, they attempt to despiritualize us when we go into certain of these spaces. And many of the spaces that I'm called to speak in, whether it's public schools and colleges and universities, where many of our people are in culturally isolated spaces, and they struggle with this sense of being despiritualized and not properly recognized and disempowered and so forth. So these original names are very, very intentional and very important. All life on planet Earth began deep down here near Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, near the base of the Nile River. And these names are very, very important. What we today call Sudan in ancient times was called Nubia. Everybody say Nubia. Nubia. What we today call Egypt in ancient times was called Kemet. Everybody say Kemet. Yeah. What we today call Ethiopia in ancient times was called Kush. Everybody say Kush. Kush. Now, I've discovered that that means different things to different people, right? I was speaking to a group of students, high school students down in Alabama, and when I got to this part of the presentation, instead of them repeating Kush, this whole audience of about 200 high school seniors, they started laughing. I said, I didn't know I said something funny. What was it? They said, well, Dr. Cool, when we say Kush, we're talking about, what is it? Weed, right? Marijuana. So that became a lesson. That became a teachable moment. So I asked them, I said, how many of y'all know somebody who's been locked up for using or selling weed? And all the hands went up. This was before it's been legalized in some places. Almost all the hands went up. I said, isn't that interesting? That you could get locked up, but then only a few short years later, somebody with the stroke of a pen makes it legal, and now all of a sudden, the cannabis industry, they changed the name too to its Latin word cannabis, and now that's one of the fastest growing industries in America. But what about all those brothers that got locked up? What about all those families that were separated as a result of that? Ashe? But then also, we had to take a moment to talk about the fact that all the chemicals that you need to be high are already in your body. Y'all didn't hear what I just said. All the chemicals that you need to be high are already in your body. You just haven't been taught the African sacred science to learn how to trigger the release of those chemicals, because you could be high all the time. Look, I'm high right now, y'all. But I haven't smoking nothing. I haven't smoking nothing. And I don't need to, because I understand African sacred science. This is making sense. And so the original names tell the whole story. One of the original names of Egypt is Kemet. And Asa Hilliard tells us that all of these Nile Valley civilizations were high-tech civilizations. All of them. Ashe? And Kemet emerged from them. We're going to focus in on Kemet because Kemet did the best job of preserving that scientific knowledge in the form of writings, in the form of literature, research literature, in the form of monuments, and in the form of artifacts. Ashe? But please know, all of these were high-tech civilizations. Okay? So we're going to key in on Kemet. And my friend Tony Browder tells us in his book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, that this was the original rendering of the name Kemet. You have a charred or burnt piece of wood in the original writings of the Medu-Neter. It represents the K and the M sound. They didn't use vowels the way that we do today. A, E, I, O, and U. So the charred or burnt piece of wood represents the K and the M sound. The owl represents the M sound also. The bread loaf represents the T sound. This by itself means what, everybody? This by itself actually means black. This means what, everybody? Black. In Medu-Neter writing, or what some people call hieroglyphics, but hieroglyphics is a Greek term, and this is not Greek writing, Ashe? In Medu-Neter writing, X with a circle around it is a determinative. What's the root word of determinative? Determine. So a determinative determines what the rest of the word is referring to. What did we say this means? Black. This means black. X with a circle around it means nation. What does this mean together, everybody? I promise you're not going to see this on the History Channel. I promise you're not going to see this in your child's textbook if they go to a public school or a Christian school or a private school. Ashe? But what are they going to see it at home from you is the question. Okay? And so, thank you. So, these original names tell the whole story. So, we want to look at who these people were. We want to know what they look like, get an example of what they did, because their commitment and pursuit of excellence can inform and inspire our pursuit and commitment to excellence. Ashe? So who were the ancient Kemites and what did they look like? So I had to do very strange things, picking up from the great African-centered scholars of the 80s and 90s, like Dr. Asa Hilliard, like Dr. Marimba Ani, Dr. Malefi Asante, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, Runoko Rashidi, and so many others, picking up and continuing their kind of work. I have taken ancient statues, and I have taken the names and faces of prominent people, black people, that you would recognize, just to approximate the appearance of who the ancient Kemites were. Ashe? So all I'm doing is looking for at least a slight similarity. So for example, when I see the face of King Mentuhotep here, when I see that and I say, man, he looks a little bit like LeBron James. Can you see a slight similarity there? Can you see it? Okay. And then, when I see the face of King Amenhotep III, take a look at the high cheekbones, the nose, the thick lips. I said, man, he looks like a brother who used to play in the NFL by the name of Adrian Peterson. Can you see a slight similarity there? Yes? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then when I see, for example, the face of Queen T, many of us have seen this face before. But when you saw, raise your hand if you've seen this particular picture. I'm sure probably most of you all have, right? But what you may not have realized when you were looking at this picture is you're looking at the face of former First Lady Michelle Obama. Can you see it? Ashe? When we go a little bit further, take a look at the face of King Khafre. I said, man, that face looks familiar. Where have I seen that face before? Oh, maybe he looks a little bit like Kobe Bryant, right? Wow, oh man. Then when we go a little bit further, we take a look at King Amenemhet. Take a look at the nose, even though it's been chiseled off, the thick lips, the wide nose, thick lips. You can see the locks, you can see the beard. Man, looks a lot like a brother who used to play for the Atlanta Falcons named Dante Robinson. Can you see it? Okay. And then, how about Queen Amenertis? I thought she looked a little bit like Lupita Nyong'o. And then when we see King Narmer, again, high cheekbones, nose, lips. Look at the eyes. I said, man, he looks a lot like the gospel singer Kirk Franklin, right? So as I begin to piece these things together and make these kinds of connections, some very interesting things begin to happen. I would see a picture like this of King Sinwar. I said, man, he looks like the actor Mahershala Ali. And as I'm going, I'm seeing all of these different similarities. Take a look at this. This is an unknown sister who's written in the glyphs compared to this sister right here. It's like everywhere I go, I can't unsee it. Ashe? I can't unsee it. And here's the thing. When I look at us, I see kings and queens, but we've been taught to see ourselves as niggas and bitches.
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught that. I said, when I look at us, I see kings and queens, but we've been taught to see ourselves as the N word and the B word. That is deeply problematic. We don't have a sense of who we are, whose we are, where we came from, and what we're capable of doing and being. Take a look at this. This is the glyph for face. Tell me that don't look like Don Cheadle. This is the hyperglyph for face.
That looks just like
Ashe? But if you look at any of the textbooks that our children are reading from in public schools, you wouldn't get the sense that these were African people. Ashe? There's still a massive cover-up. It was benign neglect, but now they're coming directly at us and removing any vestiges of any kind of blackness or consciousness. So if our children aren't getting this at home, then they're definitely not going to get it, unless they have a subversive teacher like I was in the classroom. This is our brother Tony Browder, whom I'm sure many of you are familiar with, yes? Yeah. Okay. He was astounded to find that when he became the first black person to lead an archaeological excavation in Egypt. Think about that. All of the information that we've been receiving prior to him was coming through European hands. Think about that. For the first time, we now had a conscious black man who was leading an archaeological excavation, and he was reconstructing an ancient Kushite tomb of Karakorum. And as they began to dig through the rubble and push away all of the debris and reconstruct this temple, he comes to find out what Karakorum looks like. And what he comes to find out is that all of this time he's been digging and researching and writing and cataloging all this stuff, he was really only on a search for himself, because that's what Karakorum looks like. Ashe? The more we dig into who we are, we will run right into our ancestors. Ashe? And take a look now, because of the work that I do, I get emails from people all over the world telling me very interesting things. So a brother writes me one day an email. I don't know who this person is. And he said, I had my DNA tested, and the DNA revealed that I'm a direct ancestor of Ramses III. So I'm like, okay. And then he includes some pictures. That's actually Ramses III, not Amenhotep III. Ashe? I made a typo there. That's Ramses III. So he sends this picture of Ramses III, and then he sends the picture of himself. This is Dexter Cali. Ashe? You should look him up on YouTube. There's an interview of him and everything. He's going to be going on one of my Egypt tours. I'm waiting to hear back from him if he's going this summer with us. But a phenomenal story. Can you see the resemblance? Yes. It's interesting that we don't have a clue of who we really are. Ashe? Because if we really knew who we are, we would be operating very differently than we do today. And what's further interesting is he had no interest in our history and culture. None whatsoever. He wasn't the type of person to study this kind of information. But King Ramses III's father was Seti I. And it just so happens that Dexter has a company, a tech company called Smart Eye Technology Incorporated. Seti for short. So it's like we're doing things that we're walking in the footsteps of our ancestors, not even realizing that we're being guided by a force that we don't even understand. Ashe? But when we do consciously recognize it and consciously connect to it, now the science tells us that our power will be accelerated and we can begin to accomplish things that to other people would look unbelievable. Ashe? That's what allows Dr. Baruch to build a complex like this. This is what allows us to do great things. One of my most recent book is entitled Kepra. And in it, one of the things that I found out was that scientific research has demonstrated that 95% of who we are is based on a set of pre-programmed automatic thought patterns. I want you to think about that for a second. 95% of who we show up to be has already been pre-programmed with automatic thought programs. So to demonstrate this, I want you to think about how you wake up every day. What's the first thing that you do? You turn over and grab the cell phone. Maybe you get out of bed, use the restroom. Maybe you wash your face, brush your, I don't know, whatever your morning routine is. And then what information do you ingest? Do you go to social media? Do you turn on the radio? Do you turn on the television? Do you turn on the news? Whatever you do, 95% of who we are is based on a set of pre-programmed automatic thought patterns. The Last Poets, a very early hip-hop group, would say it like this. They got you on automatic push-button remote control. Automatic push-button remote control, synthetic genetics commands your soul. Automatic push-button remote control, synthetic genetics commands your soul. 95% of our thoughts and behaviors have already been prescribed. what are we doing to change at least the other 5%, to add new knowledge, new insights, new reading, new discussions, new organizing, new strategizing, Ashe? Because if we don't do something different, we will keep drifting along. Let me see if I can explain like this. One of the things that my wife and I used to still enjoy doing is going to the beach. But when our two sons, when they were younger, when we would go to the beach, they might be 8 or 10 years old, and I would tell them, okay, look, we just pitched our umbrella right in this area. Now, when you go out into the ocean water, you're going to start drifting down the shore, and you won't even realize it. So take note of the color of our umbrella right here, and maybe about every 15 minutes, you need to kind of come back to where we are. Otherwise, you'll start what? Drifting down the shore. But what's happening to us, brothers and sisters, is we have been engaged in the societal drift of Eurocentric society. And we get carried further and further away from our ancestral teachings, and then we look up and we can't find home. We look up and we can't find home. And when you can't find home, you lose your bearings. You lose your sense of self. You're alienated and isolated. And as Dr. Amos Wilson says, you're alienated to serve aliens. And that's what ends up happening. So we have to be very, very intentional about deprogramming ourselves and reprogramming ourselves with the right types of thought patterns and behaviors. Ashe? So these pictures and images that I've shared with you may be interesting, but they may not necessarily be said to be scientific. Okay? Well, let's go to the quintessential scientist, the master teacher, Dr. Chike Akua, who hailed from Senegal, West Africa. Multidisciplinary, historian, linguist, physicist, anthropologist, political scientist, and when you know that much, you got to be an activist too. He spent some time in prison because of his organizing and activism. But in the midst of his scientific research, he produced 12 areas of empirical evidence that the ancient Kemites were black. How many areas, everybody? 12. You may have heard about one of those areas. One of those areas was the melanin dosage test. Okay? So he goes to the curators of the Louvre Museum in Paris, where they have the stolen royal mummies of Kemet. He's working at on his doctorate at the Sorbonne in Paris. The Sorbonne is one of the top universities in the world. And he says, if you will give me access to the royal mummies of Kemet, I will perform this melanin dosage test to demonstrate that the ancient Kemites were black. I will take a skin sample from the mummy, I will put it in a solution of ethyl benzoate, and under light, when you shine light on it in the microscope, it will cause the melanocytes to become fluorescent. Melanocytes are the cells that hold the melanin. Ashe? Melanin is a skin pigment. Melanocytes are the cells that hold the skin pigment. Ashe? And you can literally, when those melanocytes become fluorescent, you can literally count them under a microscope to determine the skin tone or the shade of the person, because watch this, melanin doesn't degrade over time. Ashe? Do you think they gave him access to the royal mummies? No, of course not. But he was unrelenting. And for 2 years, he continued to petition them to give him access. They finally gave him access to the royal mummies. And what happened in his research was absolutely astounding. Watch it. Well, first, take a look at Dr. Diop here. Take a look at his face. Take a look at his appearance. Everybody see him? Okay. This is his direct quote. Let's read the first 2 lines together. He said what? They were black, more black than I. That's not the deepest part though. Watch this. He says, but I have found that many other people have done the same research before me, but they never published their findings. The reason I know this is because I found that the skin of the many mummies had already been completely scraped. The reason they didn't want to give him access to the royal mummies is because they had already done the same research and experiment and came to the same conclusion. You would be amazed at the great lengths people will go to make sure that we don't know who we are, to make sure that our history is buried, to make sure that our history is erased, to make sure that you remain a nigga. I say, because people make multi-billions of dollars a year by keeping you a nigga. And they will make sure that they put it in your music. They will make sure that they put it in your movies. They'll make sure that they put it in your videos. They make sure that they put it in your mouth. Because they understand the connection between identity and activity. Because if I think that's what I am, that's what I'm going to act like. But if I'm a proud African, then that's what I'm going to act like. If I'm an institution builder, then that's what I'm going to act like. If I'm a warrior, then that's what I'm going to act like. Because identity determines activity. Ashe? On my first trip back from, my first trip to Kemet, I was sitting next to Tony Browder. And he told me, he said, other people have accessed our sacred science and they're using it to oppress us. They use it to empower themselves and oppress others. But it's our stuff. Ashe? And it's interesting when you see your sacred science in hands that are unworthy to touch it. And then you take it a step further where we are kept out of the process of even cultivating the type of sacred scientists who could come back and take it back. So we in a fix, y'all. But we're not in a fix worse than our ancestors who came off the plantation. How were they able to put black people through school when they hadn't been to school themselves? How were they able to put black people through college when they hadn't been put through college themselves? Ashe? So when we talk about what's possible, this is why we have to go back and recover some of those old ways that we have left behind. But again, we have to deal with the weapons of mass deception and the weapons of mass destruction. Ashe? Would you raise your hand if you're learning something today? I want to make sure I'm just, okay. I see 2 hands up in the back. All right. Raise your hand if you, keep 1 hand up if you want to learn something. Put up another hand if you know somebody else that needs to be here, right? Okay? So make sure when Dr. Brooks sends out the message that we get the people here. Now this right here is one of our foremost melanin scholars, Dr. Tim Moore, head of the psychology department at Clark Atlanta University, one of my colleagues, my tennis partner also. He's written The Science of Melanin, Dark Matters and Dark Secrets, Why Darkness Matters, The Power of Melanin in the Brain, and in 2020 came out with Pigment Power Topics on Melanin in Science and in Health. And he told me several years ago that he goes to these different melanin conferences all over the world. And he said, Chike, man, we not there. I said, what do you mean we're not there? He said, we're not there. I'm the only black person there. I said, at a melanin conference? He said, yeah. Because people are studying us more than we study ourselves. People know more about us than we know about ourselves. We are being studied and we're in the situation that we're in because we're being dealt with scientifically. This is another reason why being here is so important. The things that are being put in our foods. I just recently had my doctoral students to examine the research of Dr. Hayes. His first name will come to me in just a moment. But Dr. Hayes was a professor at Berkeley in California. Tyrone Hayes, thank you, brother. And he was commissioned to do a study about a chemical that was being used as a herbicide called atrazine. And what he determined in his research was that this chemical was causing frogs to change gender. Yeah, y'all don't get it. Y'all don't get it. We're being dealt with scientifically. So, being a good scientist, he reports his data. He is told to not report that data. Being a good scientist, he refuses not to report the data. He begins to summarily receive death threats against his wife, against his daughter, and the university is not helping him at all. And he's realizing that, man, we're being dealt with, what? Scientifically. I don't know if y'all know this, but California is called the salad bowl of America because so many of our fruits and vegetables come from California. And if this is the herbicide that's being used, the chemicals that are being used to spray the fruits and vegetables and so forth, do y'all see where I'm going with this? We're being dealt with scientifically and we don't even realize it. And this is just one simple example of why African sacred science is so important. So let's look at what prompted the evolution of African sacred science. Science begins with a question. It's inquiry-based. But here are a few key words. I'll give you the English word and then I'll give you the ancient Kemetic word, okay? Everybody say rek. Rek means science and knowledge. Rekiet, it's a knowing being. Rek shenu, that means knowledge of self. Tep hesed, that means an accurate reckoning. And ma'at, okay, of course we know that means truth, justice, and righteousness. Okay, so these are key words in conducting research and understanding African sacred science. And then we got sesh. Everybody say sesh. That means scientist, right? Or scientist or scholar or scribe, right? So rek means knowledge or science. Rekiet means knowing beings. Rek shenu, knowledge of self. Tepeseb, an accurate reckoning using a correct method. Ma'at, truth, justice, and righteousness. Sesh is a scholar or a scribe. So remember, we said all science begins with a question. All science begins with what? A question. So our ancestors had a question in ancient times. They had a problem. How do we get water to our crops? We're in a very arid region. We're blessed with the Nile River, or what was called the Hapi at that time. But much of the region around it was very arid and dry at one time. And continues to be to this day. So how do they get water to their crops? Well, they realized that if they began to dig canals, they could channel the water down and they could use these channels to irrigate their crops. So if you were to take a train from Cairo to Luxor and Luxor to Aswan and so forth, as I've done, you would be able to see that the channels that were dug thousands of years ago are still right along the banks of the Nile River. Ashe? But then they discovered something, that every year the Nile would flood its banks and it would wipe out the crops, destroy homes and everything. So then it was like, well, man, how are we going to protect our crops and our homes and our villages? In ancient Kemet, science and mathematics informed the redivision of the land after the annual flooding of the Nile, the measurement of the precession of the stars, the developments of the solar and lunar calendar, the construction of pyramids, temples, tombs, and much, much more. So what they had to do was say, okay, wait a minute now. Our crops keep getting flooded out. Our homes keep getting washed out. Our communities keep being destroyed. How can we find out when exactly is this flood going to be so we can be ready? Ashe? Would that be helpful? Would that be helpful for us politically? When the political flood is going to happen? When the economic floods are going to happen, right? So what they did was they commissioned certain ones among them to study this. And when you conduct a scientific research study, you have to gather data, Ashe? So you're taking measurements, you're doing observations, and you're tracking everything. And what they determined was, wait a minute, I think we got it. There's a relationship between the ebb and the flow of the tides of the Nile and the phases of the moon. That the moon has a magnetic pull on the waters that causes the waters to rise and recede. Ashe? And they were able to determine that these different phases of the moon would determine where the Nile would rise or lower to. And that allowed them to make certain decisions as to when they would need to harvest their crops and different things. This is called a Nilometer. So this is right off the banks of the Nile River. And as you can see, it has stair steps down it. This part right here is where the Nile water flows in, so that now the scientists can measure where the Nile waters are at any particular time of the year and track that. Is this making sense? So that they can calculate when the annual flood is going to be. And then they would meticulously document their findings so that they compare this year to last year and last year to the year before that and last decade and centuries. They kept centuries and millennia of scientific research literature. Y'all didn't hear what I just said there. I'm going to say it again. They kept centuries and millennia. What's a millennium? 1,000 years of scientific research literature. These are the things that much of which the Greeks burned down when they came in. Ashe? They burned down those libraries. But here's the deep part. Here's what they learned. They learned that the earth spins on its axis, and when the earth spins on its axis, they calculated what they called the great year. That's the period of one complete cycle of the equinoxes around the ecliptic, which takes over 25,000 years. Let me put that in plain English for you. You know how you can take a spinning top, and when the top spins, as it begins to slow down, it starts to wobble, right? Okay? So as Dr. Charles Finch explains to us, the earth wobbles like this on its axis. So they were able to calculate that the time that the earth's axis takes to make this rotation right here was that 25,000 year cycle. How many thousands of years? My question to you is, how many decades, centuries, and millennia of scientific research did they have to do to calculate that? Can you imagine how many documents, how many observations they had to have in order to do this? Ashe? And what do we call that? African sacred science. What do we call it? African sacred science. Understanding the processes and the patterns of nature. What students are being prepared to engage in that level of observation and analysis today? How many years of scientific observation, documentation, and research was needed to calculate this? This is just one simple example of one aspect of African sacred science. And then, of course, what did they accomplish? We know about Imhotep. You've heard of Imhotep, the world's first recorded doctor in history, the architect of the step pyramid, mathematician, advisor to the king. I've been traveling to Kemet. This year will be my 20th year of traveling to Kemet, and we've taken over 1,000 young people on these study tours throughout Kemet. And I hope, it may be too late this year, but I hope maybe you'll be able to go with us next year. Ashe, who would be interested in going on a 12-day journey to Kemet to visit the different places, to go to the pyramids, to sail the Nile and see these different places? It's an absolutely amazing experience. Let me see who's Uja, or first eyes away. How many pyramids do you see in this picture? Call out your answer. Mm-hmm. You see 6. You see 3 small ones in the foreground, and then these 3 big ones in the background. Of these big 3, which one do you think is the Great Pyramid? A, B, or C? Call out your answer. I heard A. Any other answers? B? Okay. I heard a C. It's not all the above. It's either one of them. What do you think it is? Somebody says C. Okay. The correct answer is actually C. It's this one right here. Now, before going there, I always thought it was the one in the middle. This is Khafre's pyramid. It looks like it's the biggest. Khafre's the brother looked like Kobe Bryant. It looks like it's the biggest, but that's because it's closer to the camera and it's sitting on higher ground. Okay, this is actually the Great Pyramid. And by the way, it wasn't called a pyramid. Language is very important. When you change language, you change meaning. Ashe? Yeah. It was called a mir. Everybody say mir. Mir. Pyramid comes from the Greek word pyramis, which means wheat cake. The Greeks had these wheat cakes that were in this shape. So when they came into Kemet to study from our ancestors, they said, oh, pyramids. And it stuck because the language of the conqueror tends to stick. Ashe? But we didn't call it a pyramid, we called it a mir. Mir means place of ascension. This is where our ancestors went to study the sacred sciences. These were not tombs. I need to say that again. These were not what? Tombs. No bodies were ever found in any of these pyramids. Now, when you go down to Sudan, you see lots of pyramids. There are more pyramids or near in Sudan than there are in Egypt. And here we have the Ams Mathematics Papyrus, the oldest mathematical text in the world, containing examples of algebra, trigonometry, sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, square root, area, circumference, volume, slope, and much, much more. Now, also in the Ams Mathematics Papyrus is written the scientific method. And Dr. Theophilo Benga tells us, when he translated the text, it says, the scientific method, that this is the correct method of investigating all things in order to know all things that exist, each mystery and every secret. Now, this is where your training is very important. I was training a group of teachers. They were science and math teachers. And I was going through this with them. I said, you need to know the African origins of the discipline that you're teaching. And I said, this is the correct method of investigating all things in order to know all things that exist, each mystery and every secret. One of my students raised her hand and said, wait a minute, Dr. Akua, I read that differently. I said, what do you mean you read it differently? She said, I read that as the correct method of investigating all things in order. I said, oh, you mean as in order of operations? Because she's a math teacher. I said. So she had training that I didn't. I was not a math teacher. I was a language arts teacher. So you can see the lens that you bring to knowledge makes the difference. I say. The correct method of investigating all things in order. Are things out of order in our communities? Are things out of order in our families? Are things out of order in our businesses? Are things out of order in this nation? The ancient teachings tell us the balancing of the land is in Ma'at. As above, so below, as within, so without. Ashe? Things are out of order. But our ancestors had an ordered, systematic, and structured way of conducting scientific research. When we say we're being dealt with scientifically, that means you can get calculated results by doing certain things. There are certain things, certain news stories, certain ideas that are intended to trigger a certain response from us. Trigger a certain response. This is why when the latest police brutality, murder, or something comes up, I always have to warn our people, mental health warning, you don't need to keep watching that stuff, Ashe? Because what it does is it disrupts your entire nervous system. You are being dealt with scientifically, and it makes you reactive. I've heard of studies, I need to look this up, I've heard of studies that the FBI has done that demonstrated that after 90 days, we do nothing. So they're like, let them tear up, let them demonstrate, whatever they're going to, after 90 days, it's going to be over. Their research and observation of us has demonstrated that. Ashe? We're being dealt with scientifically. Is this making sense? Okay? And so Tep Heseb is an accurate reckoning using a correct method. What method are you going to use to gain financial independence? What method are you going to use to create, to grow your own food? What method are you going to use to make sure that we have clean and fresh water and food when the stuff hits the fan? What method are you going to use to protect our neighborhoods, communities, and families when you can't call the police? What method are we going to use to make sure that we can remain healthy? What method are we going to use when they snatch Title I funding from many of our schools that have low-income students? Ashe? What method are we going to use when they take TRIO funding, which is for Upward Bound and other programs that have helped millions of black people go to college? Is this making sense? Tep Heseb is a correct method, an accurate reckoning using a correct method. Our ancestors were exacting in their measurements. This is the only one of the wonders of the world that's still standing, is the Great Mir. 481 feet high, covering an area of 13 acres. You could take the Statue of Liberty, which is 151 feet high, put it on itself 3 times, it still wouldn't be as tall as the Great Mir. It was built and constructed by King Khufu. Fun fact, the Great Mirror is at the center, the exact center of the Earth's landmass. How did they calculate to build this at the exact center of the Earth's landmass? Oh, it must have been built by aliens. We've all heard that. And I'm not saying that our ancestors did not have interstellar connectivity. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that there are those that would rather give credit to aliens than to the black people who built it and constructed it. How do we know that it was us? Because they documented it very thoroughly. In the Am's Mathematics Papyrus, there are certain writings in there that speak directly to the building of the pyramids, to finding the slope of a pyramid, all these different things. We have enough evidence to demonstrate that these were black people who built this, Ashe? And there are passageways throughout these mirrors, right? And these passageways are directly aligned to different stars and to different constellations, because this is where we conducted the sacred sciences. And the sides of the mirror represented the 4 dimensions of the self. Let's read these together, the 4 dimensions of the self. Number 1, everybody?
Spiritual.
Can't hear you. Number 2?
Mental.
Number 3?
Emotional.
Number 4?
Physical.
Those are in order, but what do we usually start with?
Physical.
Physical, to the detriment of the other ones. That's the way this society is set up. That's not how our societies were set up, though. We begin with the spiritual. Ashe? And so, brothers and sisters, Khepra was an essential concept coming out of ancient Kemet. And it was an essential concept that understood that even way back then, we have all experienced some kind of trauma. Ashe? Would you raise your hand if you have experienced some kind of trauma? Keep your hand up. If you've experienced more than one trauma, put up another hand. Okay, all right, hands down. I was astounded when I was going through some counseling and the therapist told me before our first session, I want you to write down your top 20 traumas. I'm like, 20 traumas? Been 20 traumas? What are you talking about? So, I start writing stuff down. I'm like, okay. Oh, yeah. So, oh, damn. I forgot about that. And before I knew it, I had a list of 20 things. Then in the process of going through therapy, something would come up, and she said, that wasn't on your list. She said, that's a trauma. She said, you need to add that to your list. There is so much stuff. What we're dealing with now as a people is we have intergenerational, multi-generational, unaddressed trauma. And we have not had therapy in over 400 years. Ashe? So this concept of becoming, being and becoming is so critical because it uses the imagery of the scarab beetle, also called the dung beetle. And the scarab beetle or the dung beetle lays its eggs in this ball of dung. Now, why would a loving mother lay its eggs in a ball of waste material? Well, 2 reasons. For protection from predators and incubation, to keep it warm. Ashe? And so, in that process, what begins to happen is, when the ancient priests and priestesses of Kemet, they studied nature meticulously, and they noticed that all of the scarab beetles would roll this ball of dung in the direct path of the sun, every single one. That when the Nile waters receded, all of these scarab beetles would come up and they would be pushing these balls of dung. And it became a metaphor for rising up into new life, because after they had pushed it a certain period of time, then the eggs inside of the ball of dung would hatch and you would see these tiny new Khepra beetles rise up into new life. And the metaphor was that maybe you've been through some negative circumstances like this ball of dung. How many of you ever said to yourself, man, how did I get into this stuff, right? But the idea is if you will keep walking in the direct path of the sun, The sun representing light, illumination, and wisdom of the Creator. Ashe? They didn't worship the sun. It was a physical manifestation of light, wisdom, and illumination. Ashe? But if you will keep walking in the direct path of the sun, you will be able to rise up and transcend your circumstances and begin to be reborn into new life. Do you understand, brothers and sisters? So Kepra became this essential idea of being and becoming and rebirth. Ashe? So I'm going to skip forward a little bit to a couple of other things here, and then we'll maybe have some time for Q&A. One of the questions that oftentimes comes up, brothers and sisters, when I talk about ancient Kemet is, well, that's interesting, Dr. Akua, but didn't African Americans come from West Africa? How many of you heard that before? Can I see a show of hands? Okay. And that's not incorrect, but it is incomplete. So we have to make sure that this is clear. When the Nile Valley was inundated by colonizers, there were 6 mass migrations from East Africa to West Africa. So it was inundated by the Assyrians, the Persians, Greeks, Romans, and Arabs in that order. Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, and Arabs. And during that period of time, there were how many mass migrations, everybody? 6 mass migrations from East Africa to West Africa. And when they traveled west, they took their culture with them. They took their science with them and built the great empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. And so Dr. Hassimi Maiga tells us West Africa, he's from Mali, he tells us West Africans are not really West Africans, they're East Africans who traveled west. Did you catch that? Let's go through that again. West Africans are not West Africans, they're what? East Africans who traveled west. This is why when you go to West Africa, you see linguistic consistency. You see cultural consistency. You see cosmological consistency between the East and the West. You'll see people have some similar names, similar rituals that were done in ancient Kemet. I was installed as a chief in Ghana because when they looked at the research that I was doing, it was helping them to reconstruct themselves, the particulars of their own history. Ashe? And so, an example of what has been left behind, there are over 100,000 manuscripts at Timbuktu that have yet to be translated, waiting for young scholars to tell us what our ancestors were teaching us. And Dr. Runoko Rashidi told me personally, he said, Chike, in Niger, in the country of Niger, there's even more manuscripts than at Timbuktu from our classical period. These are some of the mathematical and astronomical texts that are still at Timbuktu. This presentation, Majesty of the Moors, is a whole different full presentation about how we lifted Europe out of the Dark Ages with our science and technology, but it's very much related to today. Think about this. When COVID hit, y'all, think about this. This is really interesting. When COVID hit, they had to teach people how to wash their hands. Do you know why the plague ran rampant throughout Europe? Because Europeans didn't bathe. When the Moors came into Europe, they had to teach the people how to bathe. This isn't Dr. Akua being mean or being racist. This is in the scientific research literature. Ashe? And so there's so much that we need to recover and reconstruct. And that leads to this last session, and that is, how do we pass this knowledge on to the youth? How do we pass? This is what Dr. A.C. Lear called intergenerational cultural transmission, passing on the best of what we know to the youth. And so we've developed a way of doing that, because there's an African proverb that says, if the youth are not properly initiated into the village, they'll burn it down just to feel the warmth. How many of y'all ever seen some young people tear some stuff up? I'm talking about for no reason. Could have been something that was just built. They just tear it up because there's something about that holdover from the slavery experience. And also, when you don't own something, you don't have an appreciation for keeping it up. Ashe? when the youth are not properly initiated into the village, they will burn it down just to feel the warmth. So we have to pass on the best of what we know to the young people. How do we do that? Well, we have to center black excellence. What does black excellence look like? At a time when black degeneracy, not even mediocrity, degeneracy is being circulated 24/7. Ashe? So we have to center black excellence. Well, this is something that I've been meditating on for years and been working on. And so we developed a program called Reading Revolution Online. When I was a language arts teacher and reading specialist, they sent all of the students to me who had not passed the state test in reading. When I was interviewing for the position, the principal said, "Mr. Akua, if we hire you for this position, we've got a problem." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, we're going to send you all the students who have not passed the state test in reading, but we don't have a curriculum in place." And I was like, yes, because I wasn't going to teach from it, no way. I said, "No problem, sir, I'll create the curriculum." So every day I would write up a brief reading selection about a black hero or shero, ancient or modern, and I would place with it 10 multiple choice questions. I know you can't read this, I just want you to see the structure, Ashe? So reading selection, multiple choice questions, right? And we would do one of these every day. The first 10 minutes of class, I would put on some soft music, they would read the selection silently, answer the questions. Then, after those 10 minutes were up, we would read it orally out loud, and then we would go through each question, go through the answers, why the answer was what it was, process of elimination, find textual evidence of why it was the answer, context clues, vocabulary, the whole nine. Well, after I had written up about 30 of these, it became clear, oh, this needs to be a book. Other teachers need this. Other parents and students need this. We wanted to increase reading comprehension, vocabulary development, writing and critical thinking skills and cultural awareness. And look at what was last on my list. This was first on my principals list, the test taking skills, last on my list. But of course the scores went up as a result because we were covering all of these other things. Well, we began digitizing the content of this book. When we released the book, it did very, very well, went all over the country, but we began digitizing the content of this book and adding some extra things, okay? The book was called Reading Revolution, and these are just a few of the personalities that children experience. But you know who loves Reading Revolution as much as the children? Adults. Because we didn't get this information growing up ourselves, Ashe? And so that's one of the reasons why it's so important that the whole family is involved in this process. How many of y'all have ever been to the store before and you're waiting in line and you see a child with one of their parents and the child is on the phone? Like even a toddler, right? And they might be watching a cartoon or something, right? We want to replace that with something like Reading Revolution. And I'll tell you about the Reading Revolution team that created. So I'm going to take you inside the actual Reading Revolution online platform, okay? It's a collection of over 100 brief reading selections. And each reading selection has 4 activities. How many activities, everybody? 4. Okay. So we'll look at this one. And we'll start, if I was teaching this, we start with the power quote. This one says, books are worth their weight in gold. Everybody say, books are worth their weight in gold.
Books are worth their weight in gold.
Okay, if books are worth their weight in gold, tell me the name of a book that you liked or loved or would recommend to somebody. And it could be a book that you read at any time in your life, when you were in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, beyond. Could be last week, last year, whenever. Somebody name me a book that you would recommend to other people. Anybody, just call it out. Yes. Zora Neale Hurston? The Eyes Were Watching God. And why did you like that, and why would you recommend it?
Well, I mean, it's a real story about real people, and it's very relatable.
Okay. Everybody say books are worth their weight in gold.
Books are worth their weight in gold.
Okay, somebody else share a book. Yes.
To educate the people.
To educate the people. Is that Imali Muguruti?
Uh-huh.
Yes, and why do you recommend that one?
Because it tells you exactly why we need to do this.
It tells you exactly why we need to do it, and in many ways how as
How,
well, in terms of
exactly.
content. I say. Everybody say books are worth their weight in gold. Who else has one for me? Yes.
Blueprint for Black Power.
Amos Wilson, oh my goodness. And why would you recommend that?
It's the blueprint.
It's the blueprint, absolutely. It covers every single area you could possibly think of. Everybody say books are worth their weight in gold. Yes.
The ISIS Papers.
ISIS Papers, the classic by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. And I tell people, especially my doc students, we are walking on the pages of the ISIS Papers right now, because everything that she theorized in the Cress theory of color confrontation back in 1971, we're seeing it come to pass today. Ashe? Everybody say books are worth their weight in gold.
Books are worth their weight in gold.
Got another one right here?
The Bible.
The Bible, how about that?
And because it's about our history.
And because it's about our history, and here's another one for you. The Bible is not a book, it's a library of 66 books. So that's something to consider as well. And we're all in it, we're all throughout it. Ashe?
Ashe.
Yes, what you got?
The Psychology of Self-Hate and Defeat by Amos Wilson.
Oh, see, you can't go wrong with Amos Wilson. That's like Psychology of Self-Hate, and that was released just a few years ago, as they're still unearthing a lot of his research. Thank you for sharing that. Yes?
Faces at the bottom of the well.
Derek Bell. Yes. Wow, so all that stuff we've been hearing about, critical race theory and all that kind of stuff, Derek Bell was one of the primary theorists there. Everybody say books are worth their weight in gold.
Books are worth their weight in gold.
All right, so check this out, class. We have baobab vocabulary. We call it baobab vocabulary because the baobab tree in traditional African society was called the tree of life. Our ancestors would hollow out the trunk of the tree and store water and food and other important things. The mothers and the elders of the city would gather under the shade of the baobab tree to meet. And the baobab tree was used for a number of its resources for the functioning of the community. So it's called the tree of life. We call it baobab vocabulary because doing these activities will bring life to our children's vocabulary development, reading comprehension, and critical thinking skills. Ashe? So the words that we're going to encounter in this reading selection, I'd like for you to repeat after me, please. Number one, situated. Reputation. Access. Standard. Sacred. Lucrative. Astronomy. Agriculture. Okay, as we scroll down, you see the caption video, and this is the reading selection. The reading selection and the caption video is saying exactly what the reading selection is saying. It allows the child to see the words and see the images at the same time. Watch this, there's some deep psychology here. The psychology, which I was taught by Dr. Edward Robinson, the author of The Journey of the Songhai People, is paired associate learning. Paired associate learning. Paired associate learning is when you hear a concept and it's paired with an image, and you begin to make an association between the two. Now, paired associated learning is being used against us. So you hear crime and violence, black male, crime and violence, black male, crime and violence, black male, and then you begin to associate crime and violence with black males. That's paired associate learning. We use it in a different way. We use it in a positive way to associate black excellence with ancestors, black excellence, ancestors, black excellence, ancestors. Ashe? So that you begin to associate excellence with being black rather than ignorance with being black. Does this make sense? Yes. Paired associate learning. This is why the caption video is so important. But we don't just want them to watch the video, we still want them to read the passage as well. All right? So I'm going to play this. It's just under 3 minutes. This is just a sample of what your child could be experiencing on a daily basis while you're driving to or from school, to or from the store, while they're waiting after practice or whatever they happen to be doing. And it doesn't take 2 hours a night, Ashe? It just takes a little bit of time, okay? So I'm going to share this with you. I'll turn the captions on maybe about 1 minute into it. I want you to see it both ways.
Ahmed Baba and the University of Sankore. From the 1300s to the 1700s, Timbuktu was one of the greatest cities in all of Africa. Situated near the Niger River, this great center of learning was known throughout the land. It was also an important trading center for gold, salt, iron, and books. Timbuktu had quite a reputation for educational excellence and wealth, so much so that students and scholars came from all over Africa, Asia, and Europe to study at the famed University of Sankore. Being near the river gave people easy access to this thriving city of trade and education and attracted many people. Ahmed Baba was the president of the University of Sankore for 30 years. During this time, he upheld the African standard of excellence, running the university with great vision. Also during this time, he authored 42 books. This means he wrote more than one book per year, in addition to his duties as president. Additionally, Ahmed Baba had over 1,600 books that he owned in his personal library. This shows that he knew the power of books to transform the mind. To Africans who introduced the art of writing to the world, books were sacred and holy. Books were valued so much that people paid for books using only gold. The book a person desired to purchase would be placed on one side of a scale, and gold dust would be sprinkled on the other side of the scale until the scales were balanced. Books in Timbuktu and in the empires of Mali and Songhai were literally worth their weight in gold. Because of this, the book industry was just as lucrative as the gold, salt, and iron industries. People who studied at Timbuktu learned law, medicine, and healing, writing and literature, astronomy, the study of the stars, and agriculture, the study of farming, and much more. They took their knowledge and understanding of what they learned back to other parts of Africa, Asia, and Europe. Some even came to America. History also shows us that virtually every home in Timbuktu had an extensive library of books and manuscripts.
All right, now, before I go through the activities with you, is there anything that stood out to you in this reading selection that you weren't aware of? Anything that stood out to you? Let me tell you something. Before I started researching this, one of the things that stood out to me was when I was growing up, we had a saying, "Man, I knock you all the way." I didn't know that was a real place. Much less one of the great learning centers of the world where people came from all over the world to study from our ancestors. So we start with our vocabulary activity. This is a click and drag activity. We have the definition on the left-hand side, the word on the left-hand side, the definition on the right-hand side. So then the student would then click and drag. So we know lucrative means profitable. Click and drag this up here, right? We know that, let's see, sacred means holy. Click and drag that right here. We know that agriculture is a study of farming. They're not usually next to each other like this. Sometimes every once in a while they are, right? So after a student finishes this, they would then submit the answers at the end and the system would score that for them. Remember, there are 4 activities for each of the 100 selections. How many activities, everybody? 4. So the first one is the vocabulary. The second activity is the comprehension, all right? So I'm gonna run through these real quick. Whoops, reset, just so that you can see. The student always has access to the text in order to find the answer. We want them to justify their answer with the text, all right? So here we see the text and then the question. We're situated, I'm gonna get this wrong on purpose. We know it means located, but I'll put educated on purpose. I'm gonna just go through and just put some different answers so that you can see how the system scores it, okay? We're profitable, sacred means holy. So now after going through this, the child now sees their score after they have finished taking that assessment, okay? And in this case, I got a 60%. So I can always go back, when working with my parent or with my teacher, go back to the reading selections to justify each of the answers, see what's right, see what's wrong, and even retake it however often is necessary. And the system time stamps it. Ashe? Time stamps it and records the score so that you can see the child's progress as they're going through. Now, what's interesting about this is for every one of the reading selections, there are several types of questions that we have. And those questions include main idea, topic, supporting details, context clues. So there are those kinds of questions in all of the different questions that come up in Reading Revolution Online. So we've done our vocabulary, we've done our reading comprehension assessment. The third assessment of the 4 is a grammar review. This is where the student has to retype each sentence, adding capitalization, adding capitalization and punctuation, adding or changing verb tense where necessary. Because we know that our children oftentimes write the same way that they speak. Ashe? And the way that most of us speak is not standard English. Let me say that again. The way that all of us speak is not standard English. Ashe? But not only do children tend to write the way that they speak, now they tend to write the way that they text. Ashe? So it's very, very important that they learn how to translate that into standard English. Asa Hilliard used to call it money English, because to operate in this society and make money, we have to understand the language. Ashe? That's the third activity. The fourth activity for each of the over 100 reading selections is, if we're going to have a reading revolution, we need to have a writing revolution as well. So there's a writing prompt for each one. This one says, Ahmed Baba wrote 42 books. If you were going to write a book, what would it be about? Would it be fiction or nonfiction? Who would the book be for? What age range or audience? Describe and explain. Now, I have a question for you. That selection on Ahmed Baba, if you had to guess, what grade level do you think that that was written on? Just call out your answer. Just guess. What grade level? 5th, 6th, 4th. This is the challenge of what we're dealing with. When I ran what's called the Lexile score, you know what that is. It said 9th grade. Now you know ours, I can go into any classroom in America, and I've been to some of the most challenging ones. I could go to any classroom in America and teach our children that in the 4th grade. Ashe? But our standards are different from their standards. And no one rises to low expectations. This is one of the challenges that we're dealing with this. So I just want you to be mindful of that. So our children can handle this as long as they're being held accountable for it. I want to play you one more. This is a shorter one because this is from the primary level. Okay? So this one is Ronald McNair. And you'll see a distinct difference, though I would use the one that I just shared with you with upper elementary or middle grades. This would be for the primary grades, grades 1 to 3. So some of you have told me you have grandchildren and different things of that nature that you want to be engaged. So check this one out.
Ronald McNair, an African-American space hero. Ronald McNair was a smart and very brave astronaut who loved the stars and space. He was born in Lake City, South Carolina. Ronald was a great student. He also loved sports and playing his saxophone. He played football and was very good at karate. He loved to read books. He really liked books about space. He was so curious about space, he went on to become a scientist and then an astronaut. Ronald McNair flew in a special spaceship called the Challenger Space Shuttle. He went up into the sky and into space to learn more about our galaxy and teach the world new things. His job was to operate the shuttle's robotic arm. He even played music with his saxophone in space. Ronald McNair was a hero and a role model because he showed us that we can reach for the stars and make our dreams come true.
What's the immediate difference between those selections that you notice in terms of structure? What do you think? What's the difference in terms of structure? Was this?
Cartoon.
Yeah, it was in cartoon form, so there was animation, It was shorter and it ran a little faster, right? The music. So all of those things go into this as we're dealing with younger children and so forth. So the last thing that I'm going to share with you before I close is I want to tell you the team that developed this. This is the Reading Revolution team, okay? Which is mostly my family, actually. So this is my wife that I was telling you about earlier of 30 years. She did a number of, you just heard her voice, so she did the voiceovers and editing. So you hear male and female voices, not just one or the other. This is my oldest son, Jabari. When we first started on this, he was a college student, and he was a computer game design major. He ended up graduating with his degree in computer game design with a minor in computer science and software development, and he's now an aerospace engineer. So he helped with the audio engineering of each of the videos, okay? My younger son, Amari, is a filmmaker. He's been my photographer and videographer since he was 15 years old, okay? So he's studying film and media at Georgia State University. So he was responsible for all of the videos. But when he saw the scope and the scale of the project, he called upon his girlfriend, Ayana, who's also a videographer and filmmaker. And she has helped on a number of the videos as well. My niece Kaylee is in the middle. She did some voiceovers as well as editing. This is Tavara Stevens, my friend, who was the co-author of the book Reading Revolution. So now after we've developed all of this content, we've got the reading selections, we've got the captioned videos, we have all of the activities typed out, and everything is ready to go. How do we put this in a functional, dynamic, interactive platform online? And that's when I was referred to Jennifer Allen, an outstanding computer scientist, another Hampton graduate, and she's the one that developed that platform that you all just saw. Ashe? I'm sharing this with you to let you know this is black from top to bottom, side to side. Ashe? So whenever I hear Dr. Baruch speak, I feel everything that he's saying, because I'm 3 decades into this, developing African-centered curriculum resources. Ashe? In addition to the books we have over here, in addition to the posters and different things. So if you see something that you like and you think is good for our people, how many of y'all know somebody that needs these kinds of resources? Let me see a show of hands if you think somebody needs this. So definitely have them to go to readingrevolution.org, but I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse today. Because here's the thing. How many of you all remember Schoolhouse Rock? Do you remember Sesame Street? So anybody in our generation, you couldn't have grown up without it, right? Everybody knows that. My goal is that when today's young people, when they get to be our age, everyone will have experienced Reading Revolution online the same way that you and I experienced Sesame Street and what was the other one I said? Schoolhouse Rock. Ashe? So our goal is to reach at least 1 million black children with Reading Revolution online. But I need to share with you what happens if we don't. Here's what happens if we don't reach them. Here's what happens if we don't act. This, more of this, and worse than this. Ashe? And how many of y'all would agree that we've already seen enough of this? If you think we've seen enough of this, can you say Ashe?
Ashe.
So it's very, very clear what's going to happen if we don't act. You can get, as they used to say in the golden age of hip hop, you can get with this, or you can get with that. Or you can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that, or you can get with this. Because this is where it's at. Ashe? So we have a decision to make, brothers and sisters. And so what I have here, we have a special that we're running. When we released Reading Revolution, we priced it at $397. $397 for over 100 reading selections. Over 100 vocabulary development activities. So your child is learning almost 500 new words. Over 100 grammar activities. Over 100 writing activities. Ashe? Do you think that's worth $397, given what's at stake? Yes or yes?
Yes.
Okay. So right now, we have it. If you will scan this code, and this deal goes out the door with me, for only $97. That's a 1-year membership for $97. Scan the code, share with a friend, but the opportunity goes out the door. We are on a mission to get this to as many of our people as possible. It is currently being used by thousands of people, but our goal was what?
1 million.
Over 1 million, at least 1 million black children. It's going to go to all kinds of children, but at least 1 million what? Black children. We're also international. It's being used in Canada right now also. But we want to get this to as many of our people as possible because we have a serious literacy crisis going on in America right now. Far too many of our children can't read. Ashe? So in addition to that, we also have copies of my book, Honoring Our Ancestral Obligations, 7 Steps to Black Student Success here. And we also have a few copies of the book, Words of Power, Volume 1 and 2, which contains 200 plus quotes and proverbs that share a lot of that mother-written wisdom that many of us may have grown up on, but that many of our children are missing. So we have those available for you today as well. You can use Cash App, or we can take your card. We have several ways of processing it, but I want to thank you all in advance for your support. And I also want to thank you for your time and your attention and participation. Thank you, peace and blessings.
All right, family. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Dr. Chike Akua. We appreciate the information that you've been given. Let us put our hands together once again. And I want us to be mindful of some things that are happening today. One, we want you all to grab some food before you leave, please, right? And we want you all also, we're going to pass around a basket so that you all can make a contribution. As we expected the room should be full. The room should have been full to the hilt, but somewhat for whatever reason, probably the same reason why the program, the reading program, Reading Revolution, has not sold 10 trillion copies is because, some of us are still asleep, literally and figuratively. But we desire to wake our people up. We desire to inspire us with positive words and affirmations. So we encourage our people to wake up. And what's going to happen is, just like in a bedroom situation, the alarm goes off, somebody hits the snooze button. At some point, somebody has to say, stop hitting the snooze button. Get up. And that's what our job is. We now have the information. Prayerfully, you all take advantage of the $97, tremendous, overwhelming break that we're getting on Reading Revolution, and you share that with folks so that more people can know where they can find this kind of information, this kind of interest in our development and growth, because you don't find it a lot of places. A lot of people aren't really concerned about us recovering. We're not even concerned about us recovering because we think that it's all going to happen when some dude comes out the sky and opens up the sky and we all go up, and that's when we're going to get our big deliverance. No, our deliverance needs to come down. We don't need to wait on something to come out the sky. We need to do our work today. Are y'all agreeing with me? Yeah. This ain't left up to nobody. Our salvation isn't left up to anybody else. We need to save ourselves. While everybody else is saving themselves, we over here waiting on somebody. We need to save ourselves. So today, I want to make sure that everybody supports the vendors. We've got 3 or 4 vendors in the room that we ask that you support, spend some resources with, make it intentional, not by mistake. Show support and help us continue in our effort to bring great speakers and programming here to E-Life Restaurant. We are also wanting to let you all know about what's coming down the pike. We have we've got Sister Sherlita Settles coming here in 2 weeks. Anybody know that name? Sherlita Settles is a phenomenal singer. She's going to be here on the 19th of April. We've got Brother Heru Ofori-Atta with his anti-parasite protocol, anti-cancer protocol using a parasite therapy. Where he's having great success reversing 4th stage cancer on numbers and numbers of people. Everybody that comes to him gets a really good result from working with him. We've got Brother Ray Apollo Allen, who's going to be here on the first weekend in May. We've got the Groove Time that's going to be performing here on the 17th and every Thursday after that until the end of May. Who else do we have happening? It's so much going on. You all want to make sure that you all go to the register and plug in your phone number so that you can be on the mailing list of what we have going on. And I'll be in the back so that, for those of you who'd like to make a contribution, I'll have the basket there with me. You all can make a contribution. Anybody that came in and did not pay, please, be fair and be honorable and make sure you do pay so that we can make sure we accommodate and appropriately provide resources to our brother to continue the great work that he's doing. Thank you, family. I appreciate you all. I love you. And I will see you all at the next event. Well, hopefully before, because we eat every day, right? Now we can clap.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Are we having a question and answer session?
Oh, did you? I wasn't sure. I thought you did that already. I saw people ask. Come on up. Oh, got questions. As long as you're okay with that. I'm okay. And please make sure when you ask your questions, you speak up.
Yeah. Well, I always like to say this for us during a Q&A session. Please state your question within 30 seconds.
Yep.
Ashe? That way we can get to as many people as possible. And for those of you all who may be pressed for time or something, if you want to go ahead and get your book, you can scan the QR code over there. But go ahead. You got a question, sister?
Yes. You were talking about the conquest of Portugal and Spain by the Moors and the Israelites. What happened that turned these black Moors into the color that they are today?
Well, we know that North Africa was inundated by Europeans pretty much. And the intermixture, I think, is what happened that caused the change in the appearance. One of the challenges when you study about the Moors is that, here again, the problem with language, you'll hear it referred to as the Islamic occupation of Spain, and people associate Islam with Arabs rather than African people. There were Moors who were not necessarily Islamic. Most of them were Islamic, but their knowledge preceded Islam. There's some people who will try to make it seem like Islam is what gave them their knowledge. They had the knowledge, the scientific knowledge before Islam. They used Islam as a vehicle. So one of the challenges, once again, is that the names and languages change over time that obscures who we are in history. So I hope that gives some insight into your question. Okay? Other questions? Any other questions? Yes, brother?
Yeah. How does the generational trauma that you talked about a little bit impact the pre-programmed automatic thought process?
Ooh. How does the intergenerational unaddressed trauma impact the pre-programmed automatic thought process? There's something that the scientists and geneticists tell us about called epigenetics, that there are certain predispositions that are passed on generation to generation. And so that's one of the ways that it's impacted. That there are certain thoughts, certain patterns of behavior that we are mimicking that we're not clear on where they came from. And if we go back far enough, we'll find out. One of the things that I've come to understand is that in the process of dealing with our trauma, so much of it was buried. There were so many things that people couldn't talk about. My mother used to always say that she used to ask her mother a lot of questions, and then my grandmother would always say, "Girl, you ask too many questions." Well, a lot of those questions were painful, and I'll give you an example. Do you all remember the movie Rosewood? Yeah. When the movie Rosewood came out in '94, and I'm just kind of coming into consciousness, so I'm on fire for stuff like that. And I was talking to my father-in-law. I said, "Hey, Pop, did you see Rosewood?" He said, "No, what's that?" I told him what the movie's about. It's about this black community in Florida, and he gets ravaged by, these white terrorists and this and that. And I'm like, "Man, you got to see this movie, Pop. It was amazing." He was like, "No, I don't think I want to see that." And in my ignorance, I'm like, no, you got to see this movie, Pop. It's really powerful. I mean, the acting, the directing, the story and everything. I'm going on. And finally he said, I don't need to see Rosewood. You need to see Rosewood. I lived Rosewood. It's like, oh, okay, I got it. So there's certain things that are very difficult to call up because once that trauma is re-stimulated, it can cause a person to spiral. When I was working on my master's degree in school counseling, and I had heard about this concept of post-traumatic slavery syndrome, right? So I said, I'm going to interview for one of my projects, I'm going to interview some Vietnam veterans. My pastor was a Vietnam veteran. He went to Vietnam at 16. And here again, my father-in-law went to Vietnam. Not when he was 16, I think when he was 18 or 19. When I interviewed my pastor, I was shocked. I had no idea. He talked about how he was still suffering from PTSD, and on any given day, he would be under his desk at the church thinking he was back in the foxhole. Okay. When I interviewed my father-in-law, and he began to enumerate, the things that he experienced, he broke down into tears and he said, they lied to us and they left us to die. Because he thought he was going over there to fight for democracy and everything. So, and then the very people he was fighting alongside of, white folks he was fighting alongside of, when he got back home, they act like they didn't know him when they were friends in the foxhole. So all of these are just a couple of things, right? There's so many unspeakable things that our elders and ancestors experienced that they could not or would not talk about, but the energy was still there. And they tried to pass on the love and the light, but there was a lot else that got passed on too that was unaddressed, and we still struggle with that. And so this is why one of the missions of this generation has to be creating healing modalities that are going to purge a lot of that trauma that our people have experienced. Your original question was, well, how does that affect our thinking today? It affects us terribly today. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who was mentioned a little bit earlier, gives an example because she was a psychiatrist. She was working with a young boy who was 11 years old, and he was having trouble in school, and she said, well, sweetheart, what's the problem? Don't you want to do well in school so that you can fight for our people, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? And he said, no. She thought he didn't know who they were. She said, why do you say that? She said, because they got killed fighting for black people. So already automatically at the age of 12, he decided, I don't want to do nothing like what they were doing because they're going to get killed. So we have, and so do we. We have certain associations with how far each of us will go. I don't know about you, but during the whole George Floyd protests and everything, I had to determine whether I was going to get in the street. And I determined I'm not getting in the street because white people are crazy and they will kill me. I can find better ways like creating Reading Revolution to help our people rather than to allow them to, and I have tremendous respect for those that did what they did in the streets. I was cheering them on, but I wasn't going to be there because I understand how violent they are very clearly. So there's a lot of stuff that's left over that affects our daily decisions. Let you be driving home and you see the red and blue lights. What happens? Your heart, you start feeling it because there's something there that hasn't been addressed that's still a problem, right? So those are just a few examples of how those things still affect us to this day. There's so much more beneath the surface. Thank you for that question. Anybody else?
I have one more question.
Yes.
You did a lot of this is for young people that our young black people, children should learn. How are they going to get access to this? I have two nieces who are into black education, so I just sent it to them. But how are we going to transfer this information to the youth who really need it?
Thank you. So I have two ways of doing that, but I thank you because you're part of one of those ways. So we market our services directly to school districts, colleges, and universities, right? Because they already have the funds to purchase these kinds of things. And it's really it doesn't even make a dent in their budget, okay? But it takes a while for many of them to get a clue. That's why I go directly to parents and grandparents like you all, because we can't wait on them to get a clue about what's best for our children. So we market directly to parents, communities, faith-based organizations and so forth, but we also market to school districts. So in a couple of weeks, I'll be keynoting the National Alliance of Black School Educators Midwest Conference. That's about 300 to 400 black school administrators in the Midwestern area covering 11 states. They have budgets specifically for things like this, but here again is where policy is important. Many of them have their feet to the fire now, where different funding sources, federal funding sources, are being cut. So we need all hands on deck. We need to be getting this independently of what other people are doing, but definitely if your child or grandchild is associated with the school, let the principal know, let the teacher know, put them in contact with me. We provide professional development, and we provide presentations directly to students. And I'll tell you, I've been to some of the worst schools in the country, some of the most challenging schools in the country. And I have never had a situation where the children were not craving and hungering this information. I mean, I've been in schools where the principal was afraid to put all the students in one room. My thing is, give me the biggest room you got, put the students in there and give me an hour and pass the mic and watch the magic. And I had one administrator tell me, you did more in 60 minutes with 300 kids. We have teachers who can't hold children for a 20-minute mini lesson. And they stayed with you for 60 minutes and wanted to stay longer, but the only reason we had to stop was because they had to go to lunch and continue the day. So our children want this information, make no mistake about it. We just have to make it available to them. And the one thing our children want, but will never tell you, is discipline and order. The one thing that they want. I found that out when I was an 8th grade teacher, and I gave an assignment, and I'm circulating the classroom, just watching them work in pairs and groups. And I heard a student say, talk about another teacher's class, and another student said, man, I can't stand that class. I said, why? Because it's crazy in there. Now this is a kid that be acting crazy, but he's talking about they be acting crazy in there, right? But he wasn't acting crazy in my class. You follow me? There's something about structure. There's something about discipline and order, I believe, is the one thing our children want, but will never ask for, but they crave it. So we have to provide that discipline and structure for them to allow them to flourish. So thank you for that question. Yes, brother.
Welcome home, first of all, brother.
Thank you. It's good to be here. My father is actually from D.C.
Yes. Met you many years ago. The sort of history being changed or rewritten in this country as well as in Kenya. What are we doing, or how are we addressing that challenge, especially in Egypt?
In Egypt?
Yes. In other words, the history has, there are attempts to being changed. Arabs moving in.
Oh, right, yeah. So I've been in close contact with Tony Browder, who's been kind of guiding me through this. So there's a lot of anti-Afrocentric sentiment in Egypt right now. Some of you all may have heard that the comedian Kevin Hart had to cancel an appearance there because he started protesting because he said the original Egyptians were black and so forth. There's a lot going on. And what Tony explained to me is just like there has been this conservative backlash here, there is a this wave of anti-Afrocentric Arabism and conservatism in Egypt at the same time. That doesn't stop what we do. What I just demonstrated to you with Reading Revolution Online and the different resources that we've developed are for the purpose of making sure that we know the truth, right? And when we take groups over, just like we have allies here in America who may be sensitive to what we're dealing with, we have people over there that know the accurate history and can share it and provide us with what we need to do what we need to do while we're over there. But the bottom line is, we can never rely on them to tell the truth about our history and culture. We have to be the ones to do that. When I first started traveling over in 2005 with African Genesis, we required, because you can't go to any of the sites without an Arab tour guide, we required them to go through our training. You see, if you want to lead our people, don't use the Greek term, you have to use the Kemetic term. You can tell us the Greek term after you tell us the Kemetic term. So we required them to know our history, and if they didn't, they would be dismissed. And we did dismiss some of them, and they didn't want to miss that opportunity because for them, that's revenue. So that's some of how we were able to leverage what we were doing. But the key is we have to know it ourselves, and we can't wait on anybody else. And so our purpose is to make sure that our people know. Okay? Good question? Yes.
First of all, thank you. We've used your books at our school Reading Revolution for about 2 years or so now.
Oh, wow.
And in Treasure We're Dead. And I wanted to know, how long are you going to be in town? Because we got school. And we'd love to,
Wow.
we'd love to have you come out and speak.
Thank you. So I would love to do that next time I'm in town. I'm actually headed down to Southern University to present, fly out tomorrow morning. But I would keep that. I would love to do that next time.
All right.
So that will be an extra stop. Anytime I'm in the DMV, I got to come by eLife. I got to come by Wilson Baker. So thank you very much for extending that invitation. I would love to do that. What grades do you all serve?
We do pre-K through 12.
Wonderful. Pre-K through 12. Okay, great. We will make that happen. All right. Yes.
When you had Kevin Hart, maybe he thought of the fact that he was speaking on the order boards. The big head, you know, he looks like them. You had a comparison.
I probably should do a comparison. I'm sure there's a statue that I could compare him to. Definitely. Absolutely. Yes.
What specific age group are you targeting?
So the last video I showed you is for the primary grades 1, 2, and 3. And then we have it for the upper grades 4 through middle school and through high school. When we go into school districts, whatever a school district is struggling with, could be math, could be science, could be language arts and reading, could be discipline, classroom engagement. Between myself and our teacher transformation team, we have it covered. And all these different resources, and this isn't even half of them that you see here. We try to hold people accountable that if they're serious about transforming student engagement and achievement, we can get proven results through our team of consultants. So I share that with you to let you know, because the way that our children are portrayed, it makes our problems look intractable and unsolvable. Like these children, they just off the chain and they can't be dealt with. That's not true. This is one of the things that Asa Hilliard drilled into us, is that there are no places or spaces where our children are unsalvageable. And then he would provide us with tangible examples. He would sit us down and he would show us examples of educational leaders who specialized in transforming schools in a relatively short period of time. He would show us examples of independent black schools like a Wilson Baker. In this case, it was Marcus Garvey Academy out in LA, where you had children in 3rd grade doing calculus. Black children, where you had children, I always use an example, a modern day example of Marcus Klein in Chicago with Freedom Home Academy. And he has kids doing college level work at 6, 7, and 8 years old. And I'm not over exaggerating either. If you friend him on Facebook and look at some of the video clips where he has kids going through these different words and all these different things, and always, and I ask my students, that list of 20 words that 6-year-old just went down and recited, raise your hand if there were some words that you didn't know. And my doctoral students like, yeah, I didn't know those words. So part of the problem is that we don't know what our children are really capable of, because somebody else told us based on their erroneous theories, oh, by this age they should be able to do this, and by this age they should be able to do that. So we have to stop relying on other people's standards. So one of the things that I did in this book, Honoring Our Ancestral Obligations, is I developed the 15 standards of African-centered education. Because we're told that this buzzword, standards-based education, prompted me to ask the question, whose standards? And so we needed our own standards. So I developed 15 standards of African-centered education that should guide content and instruction, delivery and instruction. So thank you for that question. I hope that answered. Anybody else? Yes.
So there's, as you know, like a war between Sudan, right? And so I think the Arabs who have moved into Sudan is separating and making statements that the black Sudanese come from Kenya, and they're trying to pretty much move them out. What is your thoughts on that with your study of our ancient history?
So, I always go back to Dr. John Henry Clark, who said that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were male chauvinist murder cults. And he said, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were male chauvinist murder cults. The extent to which we accept it the way Europeans and Arabs gave it to us is the problem. There's an African proverb which says, it is a fool whose own tomatoes are sold to him. So our original spiritual concepts were repackaged and then given back to us in the forms of these in a way that was very detrimental to our nature and our needs. And so that's what you're seeing. You're seeing Africans taking on an Arabized Islam and destroying each other with it in the same way that has been done with Judaism and Christianity. So one of the things that I'm working on is the revision of my book, The African Origins of Our Faith. And one of the centerpieces that's coming out of the new revised edition is the 10 Pan-African Principles of Unity. That we all come from diverse spiritual perspectives, but that shouldn't keep us from working together. So develop 10 principles of Pan-African spiritual unity that regardless whether you say you're a Hebrew Israelite, you follow the ancient Kemetic tradition, you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, or don't claim any of that. What are the foundational principles that we're going to operate accordingly to? Because regardless of what your spiritual beliefs are, we still got to eat. We still got to protect our communities. We still got to pay our bills. We still got to live together. And so that's one of the things that I'm working on with the release of that book on the African origins of our faith. But again, the short answer to your question is Arabized Islam is deeply problematic in the same way that European Christianity is problematic. But when you go back to the roots of these spiritual systems, we're all in it. It comes from us. We need to return to the source. Thank you for that. All right. Anybody else?
One last question.
One more? Okay.
So you talked about the standards,
Mm-hmm.
and you talked about how our children are obviously highly intelligent. There was some research done, I'm sure you're aware of, where they went over to different countries in Africa and here in America, and they tested black children intelligence. And they found that black children are very advanced, more than any other ethnic group. Is this information that you're getting out there so that the parents who may not understand how our children develop because we're so used to this American standard, how are you sharing that, or are you sharing it?
I am sharing that. What you're referring to can be found in Amos Wilson's book, The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child. It was his first book that came out in 1976. And in it, in his literature review, the literature review is the review of all of the scientific research studies that have been done about the developmental psychology of black children. Then he goes into additional studies that he conducted. But in his literature review, he talks about how white folks were studying black babies. And for those of you all that have children, you remember when your child was born, your child was taken through a battery of tests right out of the womb. I believe it's called the APGAR test. And so they'll hold up a finger or pencil, and they want to see how long it takes a child to track your finger across the room with their eyes. They want to find out how long does it take for a baby to sit up or to roll over on its side. And they'll track the exact number of minutes and seconds, and this, according to their science, is an indication of intelligence, right? Well, all of the African babies that they tested were far and away more advanced than the European children. But then we went to school. Think about that. But then we went to school. But not only did we go to school, there are some things going on in our homes today that are deeply problematic. There are things going on in our homes that I believe are causing some challenges for our children also. But we should never forget that our children come here ready to deal, highly intelligent, and ready to deal with the challenges of the world. We have to catch them and keep them at that early age and put the structures in place to make sure that we can continue to engage them so that they will be who they were called to be. But that study that you're talking about is so very important, and most people don't have a clue about it. They don't know that we come out outperforming all other children. So we have to ask ourselves, what has happened to our children? And how can we create the proper nurturing pathways that will allow them to flourish wherever they are? So thank you for that. So yeah, the answer to your question is yes, we do share that. I do, presentations to parents and so forth, and we share that information with them. All right, so thank you all so much.
Please come on over and grab our brother's books. He doesn't need to go home with any books.
No, I don't.
Y'all should purchase all his books. We're getting ready for Juneteenth and Malcolm X's birthday and Mother's Day and Father's Day and what else we got? Christmas in August. We are now getting ready for another event that's going to be taking place in here, so you all are not being rushed out, but there will be some things being moved around so that we can support the next event that's taking place. Thank you all very much for coming out.
Yeah. I have the little
Great. Okay, we'll do. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you. And I'll be back. Okay. And I'll bring up.
There we go. Thank you.
Really enjoyed yourself. Thank you so much. What's your name?
Dr. Baruch.
Dr. Baruch. Okay, awesome. If I ever wanted to do meditation here, how can I make that
Dr. Baruch, B-A-R-U-C-H.
Okay.